actually came out in the workplace at the age of 40, would you believe? And the reason I stayed in the closet so long in the workplace was down to hearing homophobic language and prejudicial language and bullying in staff rooms and in offices. So I stayed in the closet. And by 2009, I was working as a school leader of a lovely primary school in London. And then in 2009, everything changed. We did some student questionnaires. And when we got that data back, which was around bullying and equalities issues, I was really shocked to discover that 75% of our wonderful pupils were experiencing homophobic bullying in and around school on a daily basis. Now, this was whether or not they identified as LGBT+. A lot of them were just being targeted with homophobic language for being different. Well, guess what? We're all different, aren't we? So faced with that data, what it told me was that our children were suffering. And faced with young people suffering, as an educator and as a human being, you have to do something about that. You can't ignore that data. So 2 responses. The first one, I came out as gay in assembly and fed back that bullying data to our school community to make it real, to make it concrete to them. Because when I was at school myself back in the 1980s, in the days of Section 28, I was very badly homophobically bullied every single day. And to cut a long story short, it nearly resulted in me taking my own life. So the thought of that happening to those wonderful young people that it's my privilege to have a duty of care over, the thought of that happening to them, no, not on my watch. So I came out in assembly. And in addition to that, I devised and wrote a training program, initially for primary schools, around compassionate, intersectional LGBT+ inclusion, to ensure that every young person, whoever they are and however they identify in schools, can go on feeling that they belong, that they are represented and validated, and can have the best chance of an education and therefore a life that they deserve. You know, I'm 53 years old now, and I never had any LGBT+ inclusive education when I was at school myself. Not a book, not a lesson, not a poster, not an assembly. And bearing in mind, I went to school in the 1980s, in the days of Section 28, that essentially stopped and shut down conversations around LGBT+ inclusions. Now, Section 28 was repealed in 2003, and we're in a very different place now. But despite that, LGBT+ inclusion in education is still very new. And it's fair to say, over the last few years, there have been some barriers and challenges put up to LGBT+ inclusive education. And whilst that can be quite stressful to deal with when you work in this field, what it reveals is that there are generations of people, generations of our parents and our grandparents, that never had an open conversation about what being LGBT+ is, and more importantly, what it absolutely isn't. And the only way that we're going to push through prejudice and discrimination and fear and anxiety is through education, because there is a lot of misinformation about what LGBT+ people are. And they are just people, they are just human beings. And being LGBT+ is just one part of our whole selves. And I think as we move forward in time, and the work that I do and the talks that I give are very much around, let's look at people as whole people, rather than just one aspect of their identity or one label. You know, there are 2 reasons I do this work. One of them is a statutory reason. Right now in England, in the UK, we have the Equality Act, and that places a duty on all public services to eliminate discrimination and foster good relationships. And sexual orientation and gender reassignment are protected characteristics of the Equality Act. But I've been around long enough to know that legislation can come and go, it can change. So actually, the reason I do my work is a moral obligation. It's about the safety and well-being of the other people in my community, whether it's a school or the local community or the national community or indeed the global community. We're all unique human individuals. And I believe that we all deserve our time and place on earth, but that we also deserve to be who we were born to be. I've known I was gay since I was 4, 5. I've known I was gay as long as I've known I'm Shaun. And I believe that every young person and every adult who knows that they're LGBT+ should be able to live their life free as themselves, without being bullied, without being attacked on social media or in the streets, without bullying and discrimination and bias. And really, that's what drives me. It's that drive to ensure that people can be themselves in education and in communities and in social spaces, so that they can enjoy their limited time on this beautiful planet of ours. So yes, I get nasty stuff on social media. People make comments to me sometimes when I'm out socially. But you know what? You have to bear in mind that traditionally there's been a huge lack of education around LGBT plus lives, histories and identities, and the contributions we all make to society. It just hasn't been talked about in a lot of cases. And that leaves a space into which prejudice, fear and misconceptions can come. So when people attack me, I try to be patient and compassionate about it and look underneath the visible behaviours and think, what is it I need to address that lies underneath that? And for me, it comes back every time to education. So the business case for diversity in corporate contexts is fairly convincing. There's a lot of evidence out there around the benefits of diversity to a business. For me, I come at this work from two strands. I come at it as a manager of people, and I come at it as an educator. So let's take as a manager of people. If I'm in a business and I'm responsible for 150 adults within that business, they will all be diverse. I have no control over that. That's a fact of human existence. And if I allow a space to be created where they are feeling excluded, where they're being bullied, where they're experiencing prejudice, bias and discrimination, that will affect their mental and physical health. It'll affect their motivation and their attendance at work, and that will impact negatively upon business outcomes. So McKinsey, organizations like that will do very rich data around the benefits of diversity, but for me it's a very simple argument. Do I care about my employees or do I not? And do I care about all of my employees or some of my employees? And it's no different as an educator of young people. Do I care about some of them or do I care about all of them, whoever they are and however they identify? So my top tip for a business wanting to create an inclusive culture is start with individuals, because we're talking about cultural and change of ethos here. We're not talking about a tick box approach. And culture change begins with change within individuals. And what we're aiming for is not a fixed point. There is no train station with inclusion written across it. Inclusion isn't a fixed point. What we're aiming to do is to nurture organizations that are agile, that can react and respond to the demands of human diversity in the present moment, but also in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, and also if all of the staff left that organization.